times. It's always a pleasure. You guys are the most generous people around. I grew up in a place called Montclair, New Jersey. Anyone from Montclair? Went to school in Philadelphia, and right after I graduated from college in 1977, I joined the Peace Corps. My older sister had been a Peace Corps volunteer, and then later my younger sister was a Peace Corps volunteer, and then much later my daughter was also a Peace Corps volunteer. So, big Peace Corps family. Peace Corps sent me to a place called the Sultanate of Oman. Anyone been to the Sultanate of Oman? Peace Corps to this day does a great job of preparing their volunteers for service. The first thing they do is they make sure you understand and speak the local language. And in Oman, it was Arabic. They sent me to some sleepy little fishing village. Not a soul in that village spoke a word of English. And I had Arabic training 6 days a week, 7 hours a day, for 3 months. So I learned Arabic and started my job. And I realized about a week into my job, Peace Corps did a great job of teaching me Arabic, but they forgot to teach me the Arabic word for volunteer. Big problem. In many places around the world, people are very open about money issues and your salary. So I was asked by a colleague on the job, an Omani in Arabic. He said, my nickname was Khamis. He said, "Ya Khamis, how much is your salary?" Well, I didn't know the word for volunteer, so I had to ask him in Arabic, what do you call someone who, works without getting paid? And he said, without hesitation, he said, Majnoon. So I said, oh, I've learned the word for volunteer. So, I pull out my pen and my pad. How many of you have learned languages? Most of them, yes. And when you learn a new word, especially you visual people like I am, you have to write it down. So I wrote it down in Arabic, stuck it in my pocket. And then the other thing you do when you learn a language is when you learn a new word, you use it immediately. So for the rest of the afternoon, I was telling everybody at the work site, Majnoon. I'm a proud volunteer, right? Majnoon. Majnoon. I am a volunteer, I thought I was saying. I go to my tent late at night, turn on my kerosene lantern, pull out my dictionary, look up the word Majnoon, and it means crazy, lunatic, stupid. What do you call someone who works without getting paid? So I learned Arabic and suffered through embarrassments that we all do when we're learning new languages and living in new cultures. I think about that a lot as I welcome refugees to this country. I went on to work in South Lebanon with Church World Service and the Quakers for a while. And then in 1985, I was hired by Save the Children, a local international organization. And Save the Children in 1985 sent me to the Gaza Strip. Now you might think this guy really is crazy. In 1985, Gaza was a much different place. I took my wife and my 1-year-old daughter, Susanna, with me. And for the next 9 years, I was working with Save the Children, mostly in the Middle East, traveling all over the region to many refugee camps. Those huge refugee camps in Pakistan, southeastern Turkey, West Bank, Gaza Strip, Somalia. And if you've ever been to a refugee camp, there are sights and sounds and odors that you will never forget. But what I remember most from all the refugee camps that I visited over those years was the hospitality that people showed. Refugees who had lost almost everything, living in shacks that they built out of pieces of plastic and scraps of wood. The only food they had came from the United Nations rations. Traumatized, angry, bitter about U.S. foreign policy, but showing some of that hospitality that was shown to me. I've been working at IRIS for 10 years. It's now been 30 years since Save the Children sent me to the Gaza Strip. You're wondering, well, what happened to little Susanna, who celebrated her first birthday in the Gaza Strip in 1985? Well, little Susanna is now 30 years old, and she is working for the United Nations Agency for Refugees in Erbil, northern Iraq. Isn't that ironic? Her dad is welcoming refugees to safety and a new life in this country, and my daughter goes there to cover the story. She's a journalist, to cover the story of Syrian and Iraqi refugees. She's fine. What is a refugee anyway? I keep mentioning this word refugee. A refugee, international law definition of a refugee, we should be clear before we go any further, is someone who has fled his or her home country because they have been persecuted. So that's what distinguishes them from that large community of immigrants. Anyone who's come from another country to this country. Refugee is someone who was forced to flee their home country because they were persecuted. Because of their race, their religion, their nationality, their social group, or their political opinion. 18 million refugees in the world today, including about 3 million Syrians. That's the biggest and most critical crisis at the moment. There are more than 1 million Syrian refugees in Lebanon. That means that 1 in 4 people in Lebanon is a refugee from Syria. But what happens to refugees? Well, they wait. They wait and they hope to go home. I mean, if we were suddenly made refugees and had to flee to Canada, we would dream of coming back to Connecticut. If that's not possible, and it usually isn't for the millions of refugees in the world, the next best thing is to integrate into the country they have fled to. So Somali refugees to integrate into the Kenyan culture, or for the Iraqi refugees to get legal permanent residency in Jordan and make a life there. That usually doesn't happen. Governments will allow refugee camps to exist, and maybe even millions of refugees to live on their soil. But to make them citizens, that's another thing. So the third option for refugees, and it's really an opportunity for a tiny fraction of 18 million, and that's resettlement. The way that works is governments from all over the world, there are about 14 or 15 that do it on a regular basis, they send representatives to refugee camps, they sit down and they interview them. What do you mean you're really a refugee? Describe the persecution. They'll give you a health screen. They'll do a background check to make sure that you're not going to be a security risk. And after all of this vetting and interviewing and interrogation, they might invite you to come to their country and to become citizens. I said, about 14 countries do it every year. The United States government every year invites about 70,000 refugees to come to the United States. 70,000. They're spread all across the country, and they're welcomed by small nonprofit organizations like IRIS. How many come to Connecticut, you're wondering? 550. How many does IRIS welcome every year? About 240. We're welcoming people from Afghanistan, Iraq, Congo, Somalia, Sudan, Eritrea these days. And for us, it begins with an email. Get an email from the State Department that says, family of 6 from Iraq, family of 10 from the Congo are arriving in 2 weeks. Get ready. So what do I have to do? That's right. First thing I have to do is get the apartment. And then furnish it with donated furniture. Donated furniture. We don't have the money to run to IKEA and spend $3,000 on new furniture. Where did that donated furniture come from? Trinity, Southport. You guys have been extremely generous over the years, contributing furniture. In fact, I heard that you're doing it next weekend, Saturday and Sunday, between the hours of 12 and 4. Oh, good. 12 and 4. To bring not just furniture, but imagine you're a refugee, you're coming to an apartment completely empty. Yes, you have to put in furniture. You have to stock the kitchen. with pots and pans and plates and glasses and knives and forks and spoons and you name it, everything that's needed for a kitchen, we need to provide for the family. So we furnish the apartment with the help of volunteers, stock the kitchen with utensils and plates and pots and pans and food, and then we have to find someone in the community who will cook a culturally appropriate hot meal to serve this family. She's smiling. What a sweet tradition. You think it's my idea? No, it's a federal government requirement. Now you're really smiling. You're thinking, I can't believe our federal government, which is being bashed right and left by all sides of the political spectrum, has a rule that makes so much sense. Within 2 hours of a refugee's arrival in this country, they must be served a culturally appropriate hot meal. We find someone who can, cook Congolese or prepare an Iraqi dish, and we get everything ready to meet the family at the airport or the train station. They come late at night, in the winter, there's 3 feet of snow, and Fatima leans over to Ahmed and says, why did we come to this place, Connecticut, with so much snow and it's so cold? Kids are crying, parents are terrified. But we bundle them up, take them to their apartment, they eat their culturally appropriate hot meal, they have a good night's sleep. The next day, my amazing staff, case managers, bring them to the office, they sit them down and say, okay, here's the drill. We're going to enroll your kids in school, we're going to help you learn English, we're going to help you find a job, we're going to connect you to health care, we're going to do all this as quickly as possible because we don't have that much money. The U.S. government gives us a little bit of funding, and from that, we're expected to leverage a lot of private assistance, financial donations, volunteers, partnerships with other organizations, contributions from foundations, and congregations. And on top of all of the services that we provide for refugees, we also sit them down and say, okay, this is going to be a culture shock for you. It's not easy adjusting to a brand new society and culture like the United States. Just last week, we divided our clients' new arrivals into 2 groups, men and women, and we asked them, so what do you think the greatest challenges are going to be? What do you find here in the United States that makes you a little uncomfortable? And we'll talk about it. Well, the women said, I'm scared to death of dogs, even when they're on leashes. Why do Americans have so many dogs? I've also heard refugees say, why do so many Americans run? What are they running from? And I can relate to that. When I was in South Lebanon, I was almost shocked for running. Because, when you run, maybe you planted a bomb and you're running away. It's a new thing. The women also said, which kind of broke my heart a little bit, they are very uncomfortable because people stare at them. Most of our women come from traditional Muslim societies and cover their head. People cross the street when they see us come, and they don't say hello. They also have said, the women, how long will it take our men to give us equal rights? We're really looking forward to having equal rights in this country. And the men said in their group, how can I become an American but still hang on to my identity as an Afghan man or an Iraqi man or a Sudanese? These are tough. Tough struggles that people go through. But they make it. They make it, and before you know it, the kids are learning English, they're winning academic awards in school, parents are learning English, they get jobs, they're able to pay their rent, they're able to be self-sufficient, and a year after they arrived, we helped them get their green cards, and then 5 years later, they naturalized. Refugees who come to this country are totally documented. They're the most legally documented immigrant in the country. They're all on track to become U.S. citizens. So it is a remarkable program. How does it happen? Well, I mentioned we get a little bit of government funding, we get private support as well. I have an amazing staff, incredible volunteers, partnerships with Yale New Haven Hospital, New Haven Adult Education, foundations and other nonprofits in the greater New Haven area, and congregations like yours all over the state of Connecticut step forward and help. You provided funding so we could start a daycare center. You provided funding so we could give rent subsidies for refugees who need a little more time to learn English and get jobs. You provided us with funding so we could buy hundreds of brand new mattresses. Great way to welcome people. It's not to give them a new mattress. Brand new mattresses to hundreds of refugees because of Southport, Trinity. And every year you gather furniture and household items for us to furnish apartments. Thank you for all of that. I stopped by a liquor store in New Haven who also supports us. They give us bottles of wine for our receptions and prizes for our 5K run for refugees that we do every year. And I was chatting with the manager, Brian, and he noticed my button. And he said, Chris, you take a rest. You constantly have to be supporting refugees, and what about Americans who need help, he said. People born here were homeless and lost their jobs. And I said to Brian, Brian, you know better. It's not one or the other. It's not either or. It's a false choice. We have to do both. Of course we have to help people who were born in this country. Of course we have to provide assistance to our neighbors and friends, people who we've lived with all our lives who need help. For every refugee resettlement agency, there should be 1,000 nonprofits that help the general population. And the last time I counted nonprofits in Connecticut, there are 3 refugee resettlement agencies, 3,000 nonprofits. We can do both. The answer, and I am asked that every now and then, especially when the economy is down, do we really need to be putting our resources into helping foreigners come here and start new lives? And the answer is really simple, profound, and in some ways very American. Some people would say very Christian. We can do both. Add another cup of water to the stew. Make it go a little further. Yes, we have to help people born in this country. And yes, we should have a strong refugee resettlement program. So you're wondering, why did I bring this hunk of rock with me? Anyone know what this is? Any geologists in the... It is granite. What kind of granite? Color. Pink granite. Why would I be carrying, in fact, I'm going to give an award to the person who guesses. The reward is my button. Why would I be carrying a hunk of pink granite around with me? What does that have to do with refugee resettlement? Well, I'll give you a clue. Pink granite is the pedestal under the Statue of Liberty. And what special significance does it have to us here in Connecticut? Yes, the winner. I want to pass this back to him. Pink granite, quarried in Stony Creek, Connecticut. Our bedrock bosom holds up the symbol of this great program of welcoming refugees to this country. So the challenge is, let it be a strong symbol of this state's support, this congregation's support for refugees. Pink granite. Thank you very much.
Chris, on behalf of Trinity giving our free will offering to IRIS. So when the plate comes around, please do be generous